I'm finding it very difficult to quickly and easily determine how many boards I need to buy at an undetermined width and length with a starting cut list. I've attached the cut list. I'm hoping you can help me figure this out. That was an email I received, and yes, I can help you figure this out. My name's Roger Kugler. This is Working at Woodworking Podcast, episode number 82, Calculating Your Materials List. I'm here to help you, the hobby woodworker, the amateur, who's thinking about maybe going professional, maybe part-time, maybe full-time, earn some extra money, buy some new tools, and helping out your community with your skills while you're at it. Perhaps you've been thinking about doing this full-time. You've made some money on the side. Kind of neat. Life changes, situations change. This might be the time for you to make that leap. So calculating your materials list. Yeah, there's some math involved, but it's not overwhelming, I don't think. There's no, differential calculus or anything. So let's take a real quick review. You come up with a design. You've talked with the customer. You've gone through all the steps. You've come up with a design, and now you're committing it to paper. You create a cut list. The cut list includes every single part of your design with its exact dimensions. And from this cut list, you need to make a materials list. This is going to include everything that goes into the project, namely your hardwood, your solid lumber, as well as your sheet goods, maybe plywood, MDF, whatever it might be, and include things like your drawer slides, doorknobs, screws, the type of finish, all the materials that will go into the list. If you're including, let's say, low voltage lighting, include that in there also. From your materials list, you create your buy list. That's what I call it. I don't know if there's an official term. I call it the buy list. This is what I need to go to the lumber yard or to call my lumber dealer and order. If you need a quick review on all this, I covered this in episode 72, the design process in woodworking. Now, if you're buying rough lumber, straight from a dealer, you have to do all the milling, so on and so forth. This is method number one. And I think this is what the vast majority of professional woodworkers are doing. You need to determine the number of board feet from your cut list, because we don't call our lumber dealer and say, I need 2 boards 1 inch by 8.5 by 7 3/4 feet long. We don't do that. We order everything by the board foot. They go through their stacks and they pull out a board. They measure the board foot, put it in your stack, and keep adding to it until they come up with or exceed the number of board feet that you've ordered. So in this example, let's say that we're building some type of a cabinet, maybe a chest, something like that. And we have a top and bottom that is 22.5 inches by 31 3/4 inches. We're going to make the math a little easy on ourselves, and we're going to round that to 2 feet by 3 feet. So we're rounding up. Some people will round up to the nearest foot. Others maybe to the nearest half foot, depending on, your level of accuracy. The ends of this cabinet, you need 2 that round up to 2 feet by 2 feet. And so that gives us 8 feet. And we need a bottom, which is roughly 2 by 3 or 6 board feet. So we have 12, 8, and 6 board feet, totaling 26 board feet. And you go through your entire cut list and you list out all the board feet for all the parts. Now, you can combine parts to get a total board foot for those, very similar parts. You just need to get that total board foot count. And remember, when we're ordering rough stock lumber, we're ordering that in 4/4 or 5/4, 6/4, whatever you particularly need. We're not ordering in inches. And we've talked about that, I believe, in the episode number 72. So you add up all your parts and you come up with, in this example, 26 board feet. Now we need to factor in a waste factor, because there's saw curves, there's knots, there's unattractive grain, there might be some splits or checks in the wood that we have to cut out, and we call that waste. Generally speaking, 20% is a good waste factor. So if we started with 26 board feet, 20% of that, let's see, that's so 10%, that's 2.6 times 2, that'd be 552, that'd be 5.2 board feet. And if we add that to the 26, that's 31.2, and we're going to round that to 32 board feet. Now, you tell that to your lumber supplier. Don't be surprised if you get 36 or even 40 board feet, because boards are organic. They don't come out of a factory, and so they're going to round up. Some suppliers round up a lot, and so you might get more than 20%. Other ones may be right there on the nose. If the budget is really tight, I tell my lumber supplier to get as close to 32 board feet as they can, and they usually do a real good job. For some woods like poplar, that is, relatively inexpensive. It's not that big of a deal. But if you're paying $15, $20 a board foot for something, some exotic, that can add up pretty quickly. So communicate with your lumber supplier. So you get your lumber dropped off, delivery, wonderful, and you start going through your stack. If you're building something that is kind of a showpiece, start looking for the very best grain in your stock. Now, if it's rough, you're going to need to plane that. I always ask my lumber supplier to plane to usually 13/16. And that gives me a good look at the grain, and then I can take it down to 3/4 to get a really nice finish on it. So you're really looking for the most spectacular grain to use that piece as the money piece. Then you can start laying out all your other parts. If you're using maple or poplar that doesn't have a lot of grain, or if it's paint grade that you're building with, you don't need to worry about this. In that case, kind of start out with your widest piece from your cut list, coming out of the widest board that you have, all in a way of reducing waste, to try to stay to that 20% that you used in your calculation. The idea is to have some wood left over. If you can have one board left over at the end of the build, yay for you. If, on the other hand, you need one board to finish, that really sucks. So, except for maybe an incredibly expensive piece, go wide. Get more lumber than you think you need, because the lumber is not going to go away. You're going to stockpile that, and at some point, you're going to be able to make a project without having to buy any lumber, because you have a little bit of an inventory buildup. Now, if you're the type of person who is inclined to making, what shall we say, those stupid mistakes, you might want to increase your waste factor, 25%, 30%, something like that. And if you're building something that grain is all important, you really want to match grain, You might even go up to 40 or 50% waste factor, just so that you have choices to go through and select the very best grain for that project. And again, the remainder goes into your inventory for the next project. Now, let's say you are getting your boards from a factory. In other words, the lumber yard. You're using construction grade wood, SPF pine, spruce pine fir. These are going to come to you in exact dimensions. And I have great pity for you if you're buying hardwoods from the big box store, because you're paying probably 4 to 5 times what you could from a lumber dealer. You're paying full retail for that. You're not going to make any money. You're not going to survive doing that. But construction grade lumber, well, that's really the only place you can buy that, because your hardwood dealer is not going to usually market in softwoods or construction grade. Should you be using construction grade lumber for projects? Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're building things for yourself. It's a great way of using relatively inexpensive lumber to make your mistakes on. Now, using it for clients, you want to make sure that the client knows what you're doing, and in some cases, it's absolutely appropriate to do that. I remember building some quilt racks for a lady, and she wanted pine. She wanted the knots because that went with the decor of some other things that she had. So that was entirely appropriate. And so when you know the exact dimensions of your boards, things get, slightly easier, because we're buying everything based on the width of the board. So let's say in your cut list, you have listed side rails. You need 4 of them. They're 4 3/4 by 28 inches long. So you could get those out of a piece of 1x6, which is really which is really 5.5 inches wide. And you have listed shelves. You need 6 of those. They're 9 1/4 inches wide by 23 inches long. That could come out of a 1x12, which is really 11 1/4 inches. It doesn't hurt to go to your lumber yard, your big box store, and actually measure, because I have seen like 1x12s could be 11 1/2, and I've seen them really as low as 11 1/8. It just kind of depends on where they're coming out of and shrinkage and drying and all that other stuff. But generally speaking, a 1x4 is going to be 3.5 inches wide. A 1x6 is going to be 5.5 inches wide. A 1x8 is going to be 7.5 inches. 1x10 is 9.5 inches. You see a pattern here, and a 1x12 is 11 1/4. That's where the pattern, breaks down. So you go through your entire cut list and you add up the linear inches. So our side rails, we needed 4. They're coming out of a 1x6. So 4, they're 26 inches long. Let's see, I have to carry a 1, 2. That's 104 inches, which is 8 feet, 8 inches. We'll round that to 9. You need 9 feet of 1x6. The back cleats, you need 6 of those. They're 4x18. So 6 times 18's 108 inches, which is exactly 9 feet. Well, the length of construction grade lumber goes in 2-foot increments. So we would actually need to round up to 10-footers. And when you typically write this in your cut list or your materials list, you would write, in this case, we're going to need 2 1x6 10-footers. So we would write 2 in parentheses, space 1x6, 1x6, and a dash 10. It just makes it easier to read, and you can immediately go to that dash and then the number following to get your length, and there's not too many X's in there. It just makes things a little more uniform and a little bit easier to read. So you go through your entire cut list. You're going to need 2 1x6 2 1x10s, 10 foot, and 1x12, 12 foot. And you can very quickly and easily see the width and the length using that nomenclature. Now, here's a tip. It is much better to buy longer than it is shorter. So if you could use a 1x12 6 foot, instead of buying 2 6-footers, buy 1 12-footer. Now, of course, you're going to have to allow for saw curse, but hopefully you've rounded up enough that would take care of that. Short lumber is what has fallen to the floor, and they pick it up and they say, can we use this scrap to make some money? And that's what gets ripped into either 6 foot lengths, or they will rip it into, 1x4s, 1x3s. They're going to cut that up into smaller pieces, but it's not necessarily the very best wood. If they're making a 1x12, 12 foot, they need really good wood for that. And so that's going to probably come more from the center of the tree. It's going to be more free of knots and defects. And there is nothing wrong with coming up with your materials list and just converting that all to 12-inch boards. You're going to get better wood that way. Okay, method number 2. Use a computer to do all this mental gymnastics. There's the one I would really recommend is cutlistoptimizer.com. I know I've mentioned that many times on this podcast. It's neat. It's free. You go into it and you simply type in your cut list. Every part, the quantities, and the exact size. The website does all the calculations. It's really cool. It will give you the number of board feet that you need. It will ask you for a waste factor. So if you want to use 23.625%, you can put that in and the computer is going to calculate that for you. There's another website called omnicalculator.com. I'll leave links in the show notes for both of these. You enter your piece and it gives you the board feet. It doesn't do it cumulatively. It does it like one at a time, so it's a little clunky that way. But it's an omni calculator, which means if you need to, convert watts to joules or PSI to pascals, you can do just all kinds of different calculations. It's really, really neat. Now, there's another way of doing this. That's called using a spreadsheet. Now, I like to use Numeric. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. It's easy to install. It's easy to use. And it doesn't need the internet. So, Cutlist Optimizer, you need to have an internet connection. Numeric, you do not. Now, you can also use Google Sheets. But again, now we're using the internet. You could also use Excel, which you're going to have to fork out some bucks. There is a downloadable version of Excel still, but you are going to have to do some hunting for that, and it's something like $150 to get that. Otherwise, you're getting a subscription to Microsoft and using the Excel app. I use Numeric. Did I mention that it's free? Yeah, I think I did. So if you don't have internet, that is a really good option. And sometimes out in the shop, you may have a computer without internet. So that works really well for me. You're going to have to build your own spreadsheet. You're going to have to enter all of your columns, the part name, the quantity, the thickness, the width, the length, and write your own formulas to calculate the board foot. It's not difficult. It's the total square inches divided by 144, and that gives you the board foot, or board feet it would be. Yeah. Now on mine, I've also written a formula that will calculate the square footage. This is useful whenever I'm calculating finish. So let's say I'm building a set of cabinets or an armoire or bookcases or something like that. Pretty large project that's going to require a lot of finishing, and I can come up and see that I have 687 square feet of surface area. And if you think the average, gallon of paint covers about 440 square feet, you can, figure that out. The number of coats that you're going to apply, I'm going to need about 3 gallons of finish to do this. It's quick. It's easy. You can add that into your bid. There's no surprises. Oh, crap. This is taking a lot more than I thought it was going to. And your profit margin just got sucked into the someone else's cash register. Now, I know some of you hate computers. You don't like using computers. They're a tool, just like your table saw. If you want to stay with your yellow legal pad and your number 2 pencil, go for it. Maybe you're using a calculator or your cell phone to do the math. Cool. Maybe you really enjoy using your slide rule or your abacus, or maybe you take your shoes and socks off and go back into the base 10 system of counting. Method number 3, camp out at the lumber dealer. This is the one that you read about in the woodworking magazines. You take your cut list, your tape measure, and a piece of chalk. You ask permission to go back into the stacks and start digging through, selecting the exact boards that you want. You do all your layout in chalk, and you select the 3 or 4 boards that you want. That might fly on a Thursday afternoon, but if you show up there Saturday morning at a busy lumber dealer and expect to go through 25 boards doing this, they may not be terribly accommodating of that. Honestly, I've never done that. Maybe on a really small project you could get away with this, but you're kind of at you have to work with your lumber dealer. What they will allow you to do. Some don't even allow you out of the showroom, insurance purposes. Others, they'll help you go through and select the boards that they need. So you really need to just, work with the lumber dealer and, respect their needs and wishes, which comes to method number 4. Let the dealer do everything. You email your cut list to them, and they kind of act as a concierge, and they go through and they figure out, the board feet or the number of boards. They select the boards and bundle it up. You can either come and pick it up, or they will ship it to you. I've never done this. I've never had a real need to do this. I don't think my lumber dealer would do this, but it might be an option for you, especially if you're getting into the exotics. And I have bought some exotics for some special projects, and I told them exactly what I needed, and they sent that to me, and I was very, very satisfied with it. But, we're only talking about a few board feet, not hundreds of board feet of lumber. Some dealers may charge extra for this, which I think it would be well worth it. So ask. that's the biggest thing you can do. And I have gotten so much help from people by basically, throwing myself upon their mercy, playing dumb, which is not terribly hard for me. And people have been over backwards to help. So communicate with your lumber dealer, get a good relationship with them, and you will be amazed at what they can do for you. So to kind of wrap this up, those are the 4 methods. Number 3 and number 4, I don't think are terribly practical or you should rely upon. For one, it's just going to take a tremendous amount of time. And as they say, time is money. So really concentrate on method 1 and method 2. Method 1 was, the old crunch method of calculating all of this stuff by hand. Number 2 was letting a computer do this for you. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. So if you, type in 78 when it should have been 87, that could cause you some problems, but you could make that mistake, on pencil and paper also. And once you get a routine down from, talking to a customer, figuring out what they need, coming up with a design, and punching this into a spreadsheet or into, Cut List Optimizer, it really becomes very, very quick. And the neat thing is that you have a record of this. I could go back 10 years and pull up jobs and see exactly how many board feet that I used on that particular job. That's really important in bidding out future jobs. So recommendations for this episode, I'll include the links to the 2 aforementioned websites. And I also came across another website by Jason Bent, Bent's Woodworking on YouTube. And it's entitled Stop Overbuilding Cabinets. And we've talked about this before. He just has a unique approach, and I think he does a very good job of kind of a crash course on cabinet making, if that's what you're into or if that's what you're struggling with. I'd like to give an update on episode 81, Making Money with Your Scrap. I didn't mention pellets. Converting your sawdust into pellets. I've talked about it before, but I came across the New Yorkshire workshop out of England, and this guy built a pellet processing machine using a hydraulic cylinder and some welding skills, and he actually made one that it's pretty darn neat, and it doesn't look like it takes like an engineering degree to complete. So if that's something you might be into, I'll leave that in the show notes as well. Missed jobs. It seems like in the fall of the year, people are buying homes, probably because of the schools. And I've gotten just a lot of phone calls and emails about, we just bought a new home and we would like some changes made. And this could be everything from, cabinets or bookshelves built or one case removed, some floor repairs, some stair repairs, just all kinds of things. And of course, I can't get to that right now. But the jobs are out there. Once you hang your shingle, you need to kind of hold on, depending on your market, of course. But, if you're in somewhat of an urban population, there's people out there who need your skills. So if you haven't started yet, this might be the time to throw out. Now, I'd like to especially thank listeners in Detroit, Michigan, and Bengaluru, India, and the one listener in Israel. Really, really appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a cup of coffee, links in the show notes, or sign up for coaching. Now, I can do this in my shop, which I've done several. I've had several business owners in. I can do this in your shop where I've traveled. I don't think I'm going to go to India, but, if you're in and around, the Indianapolis area, we could probably arrange something, or we could do something over the phone or Zoom or any of the other, myriad of technologies out there. I would love to help you. It's not terribly expensive, and I can probably get you over a hump that may be holding you up. So until next episode, happy woodworking.